She touched your shoulder once lightly, like a moth brushing flame. But the flame was not you. It was what she needed to feel burning. And when you did not burn, she left. You waited, didn't you? Not outside her house, not by her phone, but inside the shrine of your own mind, where you arranged the broken cups, the folded notes, the smile that never meant anything. You kept polishing your pain, hoping it might become beautiful enough to return to. She forgot. Or worse, she remembered and still didn't care. But then came the silence, the kind of silence that doesn't reach out, doesn't ache, doesn't beg to be understood. The kind that watches, the kind that grows colder every day, not to punish, but to prove something that you never needed to explain, that your absence is heavier than your presence ever was. She will feel that silence, in the arms of the man she chose instead, in the mirror she once adored, in the joke that no longer lands, in the night where she almost texts but doesn't, and when the weight is unbearable she will beg, not for you, for the version of you that never asked. If this whisper already knows, you let it echo. Like the video, leave your shadow in the comments, subscribe, and stay near the silence. She never loved you, only what you mirrored back to her, and the tragedy is not that she left. The tragedy is that you once thought her gaze meant you were finally seen. But what she saw was a shape, a possibility, a quiet vessel onto which she could pour every fantasy she was too proud to name. She needed someone who wouldn't speak too soon, wouldn't ask too much, wouldn't threaten the illusion with his own reality. You were perfect because you said nothing. At first, it felt like connection. She leaned in when you didn't interrupt. She smiled wider when you hesitated to claim her. Your detachment became her mirror, clean enough to reflect the woman she wished to be adored, mysterious, pursued by a man who held back just enough to seem dangerous. She thought you were withholding, but you weren't withholding. You were empty, and she mistook your emptiness for depth. That was her mistake, and now you must make none of your own. She painted you in oil, not flesh. She invented your mystery to elevate her own worth, to say, look what I can attract a man who doesn't need me. She carved an idol out of your silence and bowed to it. But when your silence didn't shift, didn't melt, didn't validate her rituals, she became angry, not because you betrayed her, but because you refused to worship what she had built. You were not the man she needed you to be. You were not broken in the right places. You didn't flinch when she tested you. You didn't crumble when she withheld affection. You didn't explain yourself when she accused. You stood there, or perhaps you simply didn't move, and that stillness terrified her, because it meant you couldn't be controlled by emotion, and in her world, emotion is power. She thought your calm was arrogance, but it was just the absence of hope. You never believed in the fairy tale she tried to live out, not because you're smarter, not because you're cruel, but because you have seen too many endings to believe beginnings are pure. You do not chase, you watch. And what you see is this: a woman desperate for control, wrapping it in the costume of vulnerability, expecting you to play the role of savior, but only on her terms. And you refused, not by argument, not by rebellion, but by doing nothing. That was the wound. She needed to conquer something in you, but there was nothing to conquer. She wanted to break your heart gently and feel powerful in the softness. But your heart was not where she thought it was. It wasn't hidden. It was gone. Long gone. And the story she wrote of rescuing you, of healing you, of finally being the woman strong enough to reach your inner chaos, never found a page to cling to. There was no chaos, only indifference. Do you understand the horror of that? To a woman who builds herself through emotional conquest, your indifference is not a wall, it is a void. and the void cannot be seduced, shamed, or saved. She left, but it was not triumph. It was retreat. A quiet, embarrassed retreat from the altar she had spent months constructing. She didn't tell her friends the truth that she couldn't make you need her. She said you were emotionally unavailable, distant, cold, and she was right. But she forgot to mention she fell in love with that distance. That it was the very thing that drew her to you. That she chose it, cultivated it, adored it until it stopped being hers to control. That's the part she cannot forgive. Not your silence, but your autonomy. Because you were never trying to win her, because you didn't play the game, because you made her feel replaceable, not through cruelty, but through stillness. She imagined scenarios where you would chase her once she pulled away. She rehearsed your apologies in her head. She visualized your regret, but you didn't regret. You didn't beg. You didn't chase. You didn't even clarify. And so, the story collapsed. Not from conflict, from silence, from your refusal to participate in the narrative she built around her own desirability. Now she sits with that silence, not always consciously. Sometimes it's a flicker in the corner of a conversation. Sometimes it's in the silence after intimacy with someone new. Sometimes it's in the hesitation before sending a message. But it's always there, the ghost of the man she couldn't change, the hollow idol that never crumbled. And it makes her question everything. Did he care? Was I wrong? What did he see when he looked at me? She tells herself you were emotionally closed off. It's easier that way. But in the deep hours, the kind of night where truth has no mask, she knows that isn't true. You weren't closed. You were simply not invested in the lie. You didn't pretend to need her when you didn't. You didn't pretend to suffer when she pulled away. You let her go. Cleanly, quietly, without trying to appear above it. And that is the cruelty, not your actions, but your restraint. Because nothing terrifies the ego more than a man who walks away without bleeding. She wanted the blood, even just a drop, a single word of longing, a confession, a pause, but you gave her nothing. And now she must sit with the echo of her own projection. The man she loved never existed. He was a sketch, a shadow, a silence she filled with hope. And when the silence didn't echo back, she realized she was the only voice in the room. You did not win. There are no victors here. But she lost something precious, her illusion of control. Because in your stillness, you revealed the truth she never wanted to face, that her power only works on those who believe they need something outside themselves. And you did not. So now, she waits. Not consciously, but emotionally. She waits for you to text, to explain, to fall, to falter, to slip up and reveal that you are still tethered to her. But you won't, because you never were. If that's who you are or who you've become, then don't move, don't explain, don't seek revenge. Let the silence do what words cannot. Let her beg, not for your return, but for her illusion to be real. And when that moment comes, and it always does, you will feel nothing. Because this was never about her. It was about the shape she saw in you, and the emptiness that refused to become her mirror. You didn't slam the door. You didn't disappear with cruelty or fire. You simply stopped answering. You let her words hang unanswered. You let the questions dissolve. You let the silence answer where you once would have explained. That stillness, that unbearable, inert refusal to flinch, it was not a strategy. It was an instinct, a quiet, unconscious rejection of her rhythm. You stopped dancing to the invisible music she played, and in that rupture, the choreography collapsed. She calls it stonewalling now. She tells her friends you ghosted her, that you were emotionally abusive through absence, that your silence was violence. And she's not entirely wrong, just incomplete, because it was violent, wasn't it? But not the kind of violence that bruises the body, the kind that bruises control, a violence that doesn't need to raise its voice, a violence made of pure negation. You didn't retaliate, you just didn't respond, and that is where the pain begins. Not in what you did, but in what you refused to do. You refused to engage in the theater. You saw the curtain twitch, the lights dim, the stage she had built for one final performance, and you did not show up. That emptiness struck harder than any argument, because the only thing more devastating than being insulted is being irrelevant. Your absence was not escape, it was confrontation. It said everything her pride could not translate. You are not the center of my suffering. You are not necessary to my clarity. You are not the war I'm willing to bleed for. And that shattered something deeper than affection. It struck the throne, the altar, the idea that her attention alone should be enough to summon devotion. Stillness, true stillness, is not passive. It slices, not with force, but with absence of reaction. It makes every word she throws at you fall limp, because she needs resistance to define herself. She needs a man to push against, a man to conquer or pity or provoke. But you offer none of it. You are the closed door that does not explain why it was shut. You are the gaze that does not flicker. You are the pause that does not end in apology. And slowly, in that abyss, her power begins to starve, because attention is a drug, and she's built an entire sense of self on the belief that she is needed, wanted, pursued. Your stillness is the first refusal she could not frame as a compliment. You didn't ignore her to gain power. You didn't walk away to appear strong. You simply left, because there was nothing worth staying for. That's what breaks her. She can handle cruelty, she can handle chaos, she can even handle heartbreak so long as it follows a script, but she cannot handle being forgotten. She cannot metabolize the idea that your life resumed without even a tremor, that you didn't look back, that your memories of her are not wounds, but shadows fading, silent, formless. Do you remember how she tested you, not just in words, but in pauses, in withheld responses, in subtle accusations delivered like riddles? She would speak half-truths and wait for you to collapse, wait for you to prove your affection through confusion, wait for you to try and solve her. But you didn't. You let her keep the riddle. You didn't reach across the silence. You sat with it. You let it breathe. You let it swallow the room. And in doing so, you exposed the game. Because the moment you refused to fix her mystery, it ceased to be enchanting. It became what it always was, a control device. And control, once exposed, becomes grotesque. She wanted chaos, but only if it served her narrative. She wanted a storm that ended in her arms, but you gave her weather with no meaning. You didn't erupt, you didn't chase, you simply evaporated. You became the drought after the flood, and she was left with cracked earth and silence. Not the silence of peace, the silence of indifference. Do you know what that does to someone built on validation? It makes her question every seduction, every mirror, every smile she's ever relied on. Because if you, the one she couldn't quite reach, could leave without looking back, then maybe she never had the power she thought she did. Maybe her desirability is a myth that only works on men who want to believe in it, and you did not. Your stillness becomes a mirror, not for who she is, but for who she isn't. She cannot destroy you, she cannot define you, she cannot even access you anymore. And that absence, that impossible lack of re-entry becomes the true punishment. Now, she will try to reclaim her power, maybe through silence of her own, Maybe through indirect stories she hopes you see. Maybe through seductive photos meant for your feed. But every attempt will be an echo. Every performance will be directed toward a man who is no longer watching. And that, too, is violence. Because you're not punishing her. You're not playing. You're simply done. The game collapses when one player refuses the board. And now she sits alone, performing rituals meant to provoke a response that no longer exists. You've become a ghost, not a haunting one, but a silent one, a presence defined by its refusal to return. She cannot rage at that. She cannot seduce that. She cannot even name that, because to name it would be to admit that you are not resisting her. You are simply beyond her. There is a cruelty in peace, not the kind that wounds, the kind that erases. You are not angry, and that terrifies her more than rage ever could, because rage still belongs to the one who left. Peace does not. If this is who you've become or who you were always meant to be, then never break your stillness. Let her remember the silence as a scream. Let her assign meaning to your absence. Let her project desperation onto your stillness. Let her believe you are waiting just out of reach. But don't move, because stillness, when unbroken, becomes myth. And myth, unlike men, never begs. She keeps returning. Not in body her pride is stronger than her legs, but in thought. You've become the mirror she cannot shatter. Not because you reflect something flattering, but because you reflect something permanent, something she cannot revise. You are the unmoving image of her failure, not to win you, but to change you. And it is that stillness, again, that breaks her rhythm, because she cannot call you cruel. You weren't. She cannot call you weak. You didn't flinch. She cannot call you vindictive. You left with no ceremony, no wound, no warning. You are the man who did not need her to be wrong to walk away, and that is unbearable, because the ego always seeks a story. It must justify its suffering. It must paint itself the victim or the victor. But you gave her nothing. You denied her the weapon of your regret. You offered no betrayal she could mount her narrative on. You left as you were quiet, unbent, immune, and now your image hangs in the back of her mind, untouched by time, unmoved by memory. She sees herself in you, not the version she wants, the version she fears, the one without control, the one without certainty, the one who stares back and does not blink. Every man after you will pay for your silence. She won't admit that. She'll say she's healed. She'll call you emotionally unavailable in the language of self-help. She'll make jokes about avoiding red flags, but in the silence between her words, your ghost moves. Not the person, the void. The man who didn't need her affection to survive. The man who didn't collapse when she withdrew love. The man who didn't turn his ruin into a performance. You were her lesson. Not the kind she learns, the kind she resents, because she still doesn't understand. She asks herself, still, what did I do wrong? She replays the moment she thought you should have chased her. She remembers the text she didn't reply to, the final call you didn't make, the last look you gave her that asked for nothing, and she doesn't know what to do with that, because all her power relied on your participation, and you denied her that quietly, without theater, without cruelty. You stopped playing. And when a woman plays to a silent audience, she begins to lose herself, not all at once, but piece by piece. She questions her beauty in the mirror, not because you criticized it, but because you didn't need it. She questions her intelligence, her softness, her appeal because none of it summoned you. And in a world where her identity was built on response, Your refusal to respond rewrote the foundation. She thought she was the muse. She thought her presence would stir the hidden chaos in you. She thought her love could pull you out of stillness. But you had no chaos to give. You were already beyond the noise, and that, to her, is the true rejection. She would rather you hated her. She would rather you screamed. She would rather you broke down, begged, apologized, flattered, flirted, anything to make you active. Because activity is control. It means she still matters. It means she's still shaping the narrative, but you gave her none of it. You were still. You were the mirror she wanted to polish, but every touch revealed more of her and less of you. That terrified her, because for the first time, the reflection didn't respond. The mirror didn't warp to her desire. The mirror did not make her feel loved. It made her feel observed. And that observation was not cruel. It was neutral. It was pure. It was untouched by approval or rejection. And nothing is more terrifying to the ego than being seen without being judged. So she called you distant. So she told herself you lacked emotional depth. But deep down, she knows. She knows it wasn't distance. It was detachment. And detachment cannot be bought. She tried to test it. She tried to crack it. She tried to provoke it. But you didn't flinch. That stillness made her doubt every method she had used before. The charm, the softness, the well-timed vulnerability. She offered all of it. You watched, not with scorn, not with amusement, with nothing, with quiet. And that quiet became her downfall, because you never promised her love. You never baited her. You never manipulated her. You simply didn't collapse. And that made her unravel. Now she lives among the echoes. She wonders if you ever think of her not with longing, but with silence. She wonders if your lack of closure is a punishment. It's not. She wonders if you're waiting for the right moment to reach out. You're not. She wonders if maybe, just maybe, you did love her but couldn't express it, but she knows the truth. You didn't love her, not because she was unworthy, but because there was nothing in her that made you abandon yourself. And that is the deepest scar she bears, because she cannot fix it, she cannot seduce it, she cannot explain it away. You are the mirror she cannot shatter, because every attempt to destroy you only reflects her own desperation, and every silence you offer becomes louder than her most desperate cries, and every image of you, still, cold, unmoved, becomes a symbol of the man she could never own. This is not cruelty. This is not vengeance. This is inevitability. When you remove the illusion of need, you remove the architecture of control. And she was never prepared for a man who did not need her, not sexually, not emotionally, not psychologically. Because without need, what is left? Nothing for her to leverage, nothing for her to rescue, nothing for her to define herself against. You were not a wall, you were not a void, you were a mirror, and when she looked into it, she found no power, only her reflection naked, unresolved, and alone. So she will call you many things in her memory: cold, distant, unavailable, toxic, detached. She must. Because the alternative is unbearable, that you saw her clearly, deeply, fully, and did not flinch. That you saw her face and felt nothing stir. That she gave everything she had and it bounced off your stillness like breath against glass. If you understand what this means, then you also know there is no need to move, no need to reach, no need to justify the silence you've become. You are not withholding. You are not performing indifference. You are indifferent. And in that, you have become the one thing no performance can reach. You have become the ending, the mirror that cannot be shattered, and the memory she can never erase. She sits at her vanity, applying lipstick she no longer wears for anyone. Behind her, the mirror she once used to study desire no longer reflects warmth. Just her, just silence. No man, no shadow, no answer. But in the mirror of her mind, your eyes remain still, silent, untouched. A memory not of love, but of absence. She wipes the corner of her mouth, not knowing why. She turns, as if someone might still be watching, but no one ever was. And the silence, again, says nothing, but it lingers longer than any vow. If this reflection stayed with you, let it remain. Like the video. Whisper back in the comments. Subscribe and never speak first.